I know it all. And I've seen it all.
Welcome to ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy. Okay, I gotta be honest, despite all the hints we had for Kang, I really didn't expect to see Jonathan Majors when that door opened. But wow.
Wow.
Kang is officially part of the MCU.
Yes! Yes! Yes!
So without gloating too much, we kinda called this a few weeks back. I just wanted to mention it for the record, if any of you are writing this down. Anyways, Loki's finale got me thinking. We know that the multiversal war is actually the Kang War, and now it seems like a new war is about to start in the multiverse. This makes me believe that the MCU is stuck in a time loop, which might not only explain season 1 of Loki, but also the future of the show, as well as the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Oh, Mobius, come on. What could possibly go wrong? We gotta properly test this theory.
Loki episode 6 revealed the biggest question of the show. Kang is the man behind the curtain. He's in charge of the TVA and the devilish protector of the timeline. Now, while his tyrannical rule of time is all sorts of messed up, it's all for a good cause, mostly. He's trying to preserve reality from falling into chaos and preventing another multiversal war. This is a great twist, as Kang isn't some generic bad guy with a god complex who's just doing evil things because he's a bad guy. His actions are justified, in some twisted way.
Without the me, without the TVA, everything burns.
He's desperately trying to keep the timeline under control because the other option means the end of everything. That kind of gray area complexity is what made Thanos so great.
You may hate the dictator, but something far worse is going to fill that void if you depose him.
Now Loki, being a complex villain himself, sees this dilemma, understanding that they are better off with the devil they know than infinite devils that they don't. His journey allowed him to change and see the way forward. Problem is that Sylvie spent countless years on a mission to kill the head of the TVA, so for her, there was no room for compromise.
Because you can't trust, and I can't be trusted.
So Sylvie kills Kang and throws the multiverse into chaos.
An infinite amount of me start another multiversal war, and I just end up right back here anyways.
What if the MCU is stuck in a time loop? What it means is that everything that happened in the MCU is all part of a predetermined timeline, which is ironic because it actually is, in the real world, part of a predetermined timeline.
Creepy.
All beginning with the Kang variant who discovered the multiverse and ending with Kang's death, only to start all over again. The TVA exists outside the timeline, so there's no past, present, or future there. Same goes for the Void and He Who Remains Castle. And that's how you get the loop, since time becomes a circle when the lines between these points of time become blurred. There's no real start or end to it, it just keeps happening.
All of this has happened before, and all of it will happen again.
In the first episode, Miss Minutes told us about the ancient multiverse war that almost destroyed all of reality. But now we know the truth. That war wasn't in the past, but actually it's in the future. Well, okay, the MCU's future to be exact, which is technically the past for Kang. It's all very confusing.
Why don't you explain this to me like I'm 5?
In the 31st century, Kang variants discovered the multiverse, they worked together to improve each other's realities, but not all the Kangs shared these peaceful ideals.
New worlds meant only one thing, new lands to be conquered.
And so a multiversal war had begun caused by the Kang variants. Now the Kang who would become He Who Remains found Alioth, weaponized him into some kind of timeline-consuming monster,
And I ended the multiversal war.
presumably by erasing all the other Kangs and timelines, creating the main timeline of the MCU. So the multiversal war serves as a type of reset of the multiverse. Kang becomes He Who Remains, creates the TVA, fabricates the Timekeepers to brainwash the TVA, and they all protect the timeline. While Kang is the only person who knows that eons later, this whole process will start again. And that's when Loki and Sylvie meet He Who Remains. Sylvie kills Kang, throwing the timeline into chaos, causing the multiverse to eventually collide, with no one left to oversee the proper flow of time. He Who Remains' death is the catalyst that will eventually start a new multiversal war.
See you soon.
One of the big unanswered questions of Season 1 is where did Ravonna go? Or, well, I guess when did she go? She was dealing with a crisis of identity, learning that the Timekeepers were fake. But she couldn't just betray what she believed in. She couldn't turn her back on the TVA, despite knowing that it was all a lie. She chose to believe in the mission as opposed to questioning where her orders came from. And she was sort of right. Well, I guess she was too brainwashed to see it in any other way.
The TVA's a lie.
But what if it's a necessary one? Someone created the timekeepers. They created this whole place. They gave us all purpose. I have to believe they had a reason.
So here's what we think. Knowing that Ravonna can be trusted, He Who Remains entrusted her with the information to create himself.
What?
Let me explain. In episode 6, Miss Minutes gave Ravonna some reading material sent directly from Kang.
This isn't what I asked for.
I know, but he thinks this'll be more useful.
This information is most likely Kang's origin story and everything that led him to becoming He Who Remains, meaning that Ravonna's new mission is to travel back to the past, find Kang when he was a scientist in the 31st century, and set him on his destiny to become He Who Remains. According to Kang, this all began with the variants of himself from the multiverse meeting each other and working together. So what if there's more to it than that? Maybe He Who Remains sent a warning to his younger self through Ravonna, the same way that his future self warned him it's all part of the same loop.
Like a tape playing over and over on an endless loop.
A warning that tells the younger Kang about the future and everything that will happen, ensuring that his younger self will not stray away from his predetermined destiny. Meaning that things must happen exactly the way they are supposed to, so Kang will eventually become He Who Remains. Now this is where paradox comes in. What is the origin of this time loop? Is it in the past or the future? It's impossible to tell because with all the time travel, there's no real start anymore. The past and the future are looped together. Which would also explain why Jonathan Majors was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs when we finally met him.
I'm tired. And I'm older. I'm older than I look.
Not only has the guy experienced eons of being alone in an empty castle, but he knows that he's stuck in a time loop, unable to change even the smallest thing. He must make sure that the events of the timeline unfold exactly as they are supposed to, since even the slightest divergence risks him being erased from reality. So even He Who Remains isn't in real control of his destiny, despite what Ravonna thinks.
Only one person gets free will. The one in charge.
Is he though?
Like everyone else in the timeline, he's just a pawn, destined to play the same role just to maintain the fragile status quo of the multiverse. Also, it's fascinating that Marvel introduced Kang in this way, showing us the end of his story even before introducing him during his time as the Conqueror. This highlights the time loop idea, where Kang doesn't have a true beginning anymore, so it's fitting that we meet him at the end of his story, which is also technically the beginning of his story.
I'm so confused.
These are confusing times.
While Kang says he knows everything that's going to happen, that's not entirely true.
We just crossed the threshold.
This is the point in time which is even beyond Kang himself. It's possible he doesn't know what happens beyond the threshold because he never got that information from his future self. And this is Kang's opportunity to test his own free will, see if it's possible to break from the loop. He offers Loki and Sylvie his job with the hopes that maybe, just maybe, something different will happen in this cycle and they will all make different choices which will free them from the loop. But in the end, predetermination can't be stopped, as Sylvie kills Kang and the new cycle begins just as it was supposed to happen. But change must happen at some point, that's the whole point of the show, and the moral of Loki's story, which is why Loki might be the key in breaking this endless cycle of time. See, this is fitting, considering that in Norse mythology, Loki is a catalyst of change. His actions lead into Ragnarok, the end and beginning of everything. So maybe Loki is this catalyst of change here, being the one that finds a way to break this loop. After their magical smooching, Sylvie sends Loki back into the TVA, only things are different.
What division are you from?
What are you talking about?
Who are you? What's your name?
Mobius doesn't remember his new best friend, and there's a giant Kang statue in the TVA looking very much like the comics version of Kang the Conqueror. Now there are a few possibilities here. After He Who Remains died, another Kang variant took over the TVA and the timeline, and in the process changed the past, which explains why Mobius doesn't remember Loki. Or maybe Loki is in another universe, where Kang rules the TVA in person without using the Timekeepers as proxies. Now this seems to be the more likely possibility, since He Who Remains did what he did out of necessity.
I've gone through every scenario. This is the only way. TVA, it works.
Kang the Conqueror is the type of guy who will build statues of himself, so everyone will know that he's in charge.
If you think I'm evil, Just wait till you meet my variants.
Now, while it's Sylvie that opened the time portal that sends Loki to the TVA, remember that she used Kang's giant ring time device to do so. He Who Remains might have programmed it to send Loki to another time or universe on purpose.
And that's the gambit.
What if, after so many cycles, He Who Remains got tired of the time loop and he figured it's time to break free? And who's better to do so than Loki, who had to break his own loop, something that we talked about in this video.
I know what I did, and that's not who I am anymore.
Kang might be playing a 5-dimensional chess game. While he dies at the end of time, Ravonna is sent to his past to ensure his creation, while Loki is sent to witness the rise of another Kang variant, Kang the Conqueror. This variant will probably be the Kang we meet in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, as well as most likely being the Kang that will start the multiversal war. I mean, he is the Conqueror. Maybe Loki wasn't just sent to Kang the Conqueror's universe, but he was also transported back in time to the point where the multiversal war begins. Witnessing firsthand how Kang starts the war could provide Loki with clues on how to prevent yet another cycle. And of course, there's the romance between Loki and Sylvie. Sparks were flying all over the place when these two finally kissed. While Sylvie ended up killing He Who Remains, not being able to embrace change, you know that Season 2 will dive deeper into that relationship and the ramifications of their connection.
Because the Nexus event the two of you caused, I think whatever that connection is can bring this whole place down.
This love story might be the key to breaking free of the time loop. Also, the Multiversal War explains the news that Loki will appear in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. It just makes sense that Loki's next step will team up with Doctor Strange, considering the fact that what happened in Season 1 will directly impact Multiverse of Madness, as well as like every other MCU property.
An infinite amount of me start another multiversal war.
And this War of the Multiverses sure sounds like Secret Wars. While it's easy to get overexcited about these things as fans, after the Kang and Loki reveal, everything is possible. So Loki might just be the first step that leads us to the MCU Secret War, which will be the next endgame level event. And that's our time loop theory. What do you think about all of this? What do you think will happen in Season 2? Let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.